All right, well, thank you for joining today. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Matthew Gough. I am the founder, chief Echovator here at Echovate. We're excited to have everybody. We're going to be talking on a hot, exciting topic around reaching your retention goals in 2018. We have an exciting guest with us today, Peggy Anderson. I've known Peggy now for a number of years. She is the Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition and Diversity at Blackbaud. Blackbaud, as anybody doesn't know, is one of the leading global providers of software and services designed for nonprofits, foundations, and corporate social responsibility programs. They have a really exciting mission, and we're happy to have Peggy with us. And she has also just a ton of experience. She's been an HR leader, including some greats like Apple and Microsoft. I've seen Peggy speak at Disrupt HR, and she's an exciting person to have on. So Peggy, thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Matt Gough. I'm the Chief Echovator at Echovate here. We're a retention software solution for corporate enterprise HR. And I'm also a self-proclaimed HR tech junkie as well. I like to read about this and interact with this, and we're really working to help improve retention as well. So let me, let me just unpause my screen. Minor details. So let's sort of jump into it a little bit. And Peggy, number one, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar.
Thank you, Matt. I'm looking forward to it.
So again, we like to keep these conversations pretty conversational, right? We want to sort of dig in, and hopefully people get a good takeaway today. And one of the things that we want to explore today is, why do people leave, right? Why is there turnover? Why can't we hit our retention numbers sometimes? And a lot of people think it's about money. And the reality is it's not about money, because, we've all been there where you go and you say, hey, I'll give you more money, I'll give you a raise. And sure enough, in 4 months or 6 months or 8 months, that person leaves anyways. And it's not because you gave them a $5,000 raise or anything like that. It's because something greater is going on. And the number one people, from the research that we've done and from listening to our customers, the number one people leave is because of their manager or the team that they're affiliated with. And really what that comes down to, from a scientific, sort of emotional point of view, has to do with psychological safety. And psychological safety is the whole notion around, hey, I feel safe in my environment where I can take risks, I can be innovative, I can challenge maybe conventional wisdom in a positive and proactive way without fear of repercussion or fear of losing my job or anything like that. And, it's a hot topic today. Everybody's reading about retention, and they're reading about how it correlates to team and team insights and managers. And Peggy, I would love to hear, I'm sure you probably have 100 stories that you could share with us on this, but I'd love to just hear maybe a quick example of a time that that you've worked with either managers or teams to both help maybe impact innovation and communication and let people sort of take risks and feel like they're part of that team.
Absolutely. I think there's, several examples, both of those that have impacted it in negative ways, as well as those who have been really proactive in ensuring that they build a team that, is exactly what you just said, feels comfortable, is willing to take risks, willing to kind of challenge the status quo, because their manager actually not only supports it, but encourages it. So the number one thing that I've always felt that we, in either the HR profession or as leaders within our company, we can do to improve company retention is ensuring that those managers know what are the things it looks like to be truly effective with a variety of people on their team. Matt, one of the things I just watched or listened to was the head of HR for LinkedIn, and she was talking about belonging and how important belonging is. And if you've ever been somewhere where you were included, but you didn't feel like you still belong there, that inhibits you. So I've kind of been taking on this whole view of, how do we make everybody feel like they belong to the team, to the company, and what does that look like for each individual?
No, yeah, I love that. So one of the questions, when we do these, that always comes up is, okay, these are great from a strategic point of view, but how do you actually move it from, say, HR or from the C-suite and leadership down to somebody who might be managing a team of 5 or 10 inside sales reps, right? How do you actually sort of bridge that all the way down to say, yeah, we want you to feel empowered, or that inside sales rep to say, hey, I feel like I am part of this team?
Right. Well, at Blackbaud, we do a couple of things. So since that's where I'm at, I'll talk about that. The first thing that we do is that in our check-in process, so we removed annual performance reviews and have quarterly check-ins that are really more about how can I as a manager help you achieve your goals. So where are you and what can I do to help you? And then the managers have goals in their performance goals that are focused solely on how they're doing as a manager. Are you having regular one-on-ones? Are they quality discussions? What's your engagement score for your team, which we try yearly to get feedback on? So the manager is held accountable for the quality of their management based on what they're are they actually doing what we expect them to do as a good manager, and do their employees give us feedback that they're good managers?
That's great. I love the notion, and what I'm sort of reading between the lines is, instead of going to, say, that employee and saying, hey, what can you do for me? It's, what can we do for you, right? It's asking that question of, how can we impact your workday? What can we do that's maybe going to help you move the needle in some ways? That's an interesting take on that. So number two, and Peggy, you started to allude to this, the second reason that people tend to leave and turnover could be high is that sense of community, or Peggy, as you just said, which is that sense of belonging, right? And that can be everything from, I feel valued by my team, or I'm sort of aligned culturally, right? And one thing that we like to do in these conversations is try to give the attendees a takeaway. So what's an example at Blackbaud that you do that helps foster that community or that sense of belonging? I told this story last week where I've got two young kids, and if there's somebody who doesn't have a friend, they have something on the playground called the buddy bench, right? And you can go sit on it, and somebody will come over, and maybe that's not going to happen in a corporate environment, but what is that thing or those things you do at Blackbaud to try to foster that sense of community and belonging?
Well, interestingly enough, we do have a buddy program. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's what we call it, your buddy. So when employees are hired into the company, before they get here, they are assigned a buddy, someone who is not their manager, someone who is on the team who can kind of help them navigate through all the informal processes and things that happen in a company. Then we ask the buddy to send an email welcoming the new employee prior to their start date, and then on their very first day they usually will have lunch with their buddy and their manager at the same time. And then the buddy also, we have like a buddy workbook, so we know what the buddies know what's expected of them in this role. And then 6 months after they've started, we go back and we do a survey. How effective was your buddy? And so that seems to kind of help bridge that initial gap of coming in and just not even knowing hey, I don't have a wastebasket. What do I do? Hopefully that never happens. But if it does, at least they've got somebody they can go to. So that is one way that we kind of help to start the community. The other thing that we've just implemented are affinity groups. And what affinity groups are, they're a way for individuals who are similar in some way, shape, or form, who want to get together and use those similarities to help drive Blackbaud's goals. So we have an affinity group for women in sales, right? So all the women in sales get together and talk about how do we help each other with development? How do we kind of build this community of women in tech? We have our LGBTQ affinity group, and we have we call it Blacks Encouraging Diversity affinity group. Again, it's just another way to build a community within the community, but at the same time focus on how can we help Blackbaud.
That's really interesting because a lot of people and a lot of things you read when you talk about community belonging, it's I feel like I belong to the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's these subgroups that are in an organization, and it's really fascinating. How long have you been doing the affinity group for?
Well, we've been leading up to it. We formally announced them the beginning of the year. So we've just started that. And it's growing. We've already had several more groups added, since we started it.
So to take us off track for a second, obviously, I think everybody on the web meeting today also knows that Peggy, I think recently, was also appointed to head up diversity as well. And again, to take us off topic for just a second, can you just talk for a minute about, aside from the affinity group, what are some things that you're doing to encourage diversity in the organization?
Yeah. So about a year ago, the CEO and I actually spoke to the whole company and gave every individual in the company goals around how they can help and encourage inclusion. So we gave them 4 things that each individual can do and can have an impact to make our employees feel like they belong and they're included in their team and in the organization. So we started with that. We then did trainings around unconscious bias so that people could just kind of start to understand why they form some of the decisions they form and how they could possibly look at it differently. And again, that started with our executive team. And then we, continue to drive it down throughout the organization. And then in addition to that, I would say it's just, ongoing focus on how important it is not only to bring in diverse candidates for the company, but to also encourage career growth and development for our employees that are already here within the company.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing we just did is we are piloting a formal mentoring program that we also think will help with our internal employees and helping them, gain the skills and the knowledge and just the self-awareness of what it's going to take to get to that next level.
That's fantastic. And by the way, I was just thinking this will sound like a really great pitch to put on your career website for anybody that's looking to work at Blackbaud, because these are obviously very progressive and exciting things. So you talked about impact.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Blackbaud just won one of the top 250 companies to work for diversity in Forbes magazine. So we're super excited.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big deal. That's very exciting. Let's talk about impact for a second, because you just used that word, and back to retention and turnover for a minute. Obviously, there could be issues around, number 1, psychological safety in managers and teams, 2, around community and a sense of belonging. And then number 3 is around impact, right? And if you sort of look at the literature and the research out there, impact doesn't have to just be, hey, is this something that's doing some sort of social good in the world? Impact could also be, hey, this is providing, the financial means for me to send my kids to soccer camp, or to, pay our mortgage, or whatever else it might be. And so, when we look at impact, we try to think about it in those 2 sides. And obviously, I think with diversity and mentoring, that's a big deal that you guys are doing. But what else do you do to try to impact the individual, right? Sort of the individual life. And again, and Peggy, we've talked about this, the whole notion of human capital. I sort of really dislike that term, human capital, just because, they're not human capital, right? They're people that have families and homes and brothers and sisters and cats and dogs and everything else. And an impact is obviously a really big component, because they spend more time at work than they do at home with their friends or with their family. So maybe you can just share a story around how you approach maybe that passion and that purpose at Blackbaud.
Yeah, that's a huge component at Blackbaud. Obviously, because of the customers we serve and the clients we have, we look for people who are philanthropic in nature. And so those individuals feel like they're making an impact anytime they're giving. What does giving mean, right? Giving can mean I'm sharing my expertise with my team. Giving can mean I have now answered a question that nobody else could answer. And it can be as big as, I've now helped this organization achieve their mission because I'm hiring great salespeople that can make sure they understand how we can help them achieve their mission, right? So we first did a lot of work around what are our values, what's our mission statement, what are our leadership principles. We spent a lot of time on that. We then got it out throughout the company, and now we give badges in our ATS system to employees every time they demonstrate one of our values. So if I find someone that is really working as one, they've really brought the team together, I give them a badge for that. Or they bring team spirit, I give them a badge to recognize. So it's showing that the impact can both be external to the company as well as internal to the company. And then we have a program called Reward Your Passion. So if you are someone who likes to, participate and belong to a board or a nonprofit organization, we then as a company will also, support that through grants and various other means. So, it's pretty much focused on the space we're in, but it has it's very meaningful and has a big impact for the people that work here.
So what would be for the attendees today, as I sort of think through this, and obviously I know Blackbaud very well, great organization, but also, financially you're also doing very well. And so what's maybe a takeaway for people that are listening today of maybe they're a smaller organization, or maybe their leadership is not as progressive. Maybe they don't have the people to get the software in place, or they don't have the financial resources. What's a thought that comes to your head in any one of those two or three things that we just talked about, that they can wake up tomorrow and they can say, hey, I'm going to go get this done?
I think, one of the most important things is to figure out what is your employee value proposition, right? So for your company, what does your company have a value that they're going to bring to employees? And really maybe have focus groups with a few employees, really get that down to what that is and build on those strengths. Instead of going off and chasing the next big idea or the next, the coolest thing that some other company is doing, find out what do your employees really value about working there, and what are the strengths you bring in that space, and start with just, improving on the strengths. That's what I would do if I didn't have the budget, the resources, the people, which by the way, many times I still don't, to be able to make an impact in a very broad way that will not only increase your ability to attract great candidates, but keep them there because you know what they value.
I love that idea of, and I'm not sure if I've heard that before, that employee value proposition, right? Because you always think about, when you're in business, what's your unique value proposition out in the market, right? How are we different, and how are we going to solve our customers' needs in a better or different way? But I love, again, what you're doing is you're reversing that and you're saying, no, our employee is also our internal customer, right? And what is that value proposition for them? I love that. That's really interesting. To move on here, the fourth and sort of final reason from research that shows why people leave is outlook. And that is in two key areas. It's around understanding the clarity of their role, right? And that's, again, Peggy, to your point of how can you measure and reward somebody if they don't have a sense of clarity of what they should be doing. And then the second is just sort of the outlook and the direction of the organization. Do they have a clear sense of what's going to be happening in 12 or 24, 36 months? And those, I think, are probably a little bit easier to solve for, because that's probably more of a communication and training idea than it is anything else. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How do you make sure people really understand the clarity of role, especially as it ebbs and flows, but then also sort of the strategic direction the company's moving in?
Well, let me start with the strategic direction. And you're right, a lot of that is purely communication, but it's also the easiest thing for people not to get, so you communicate it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then what? So it's regular communication by our CEO. He gives town halls on a quarterly basis and talks about here's our goal, here's our strategic vision, here's where we are against that vision. And he had a 3-year, we're in the 3rd year now. And every time we're there, he gives a report card on how we're doing against that. The other thing that he does is he calls it, his name is Mike Giannoni, so he has open mic sessions. And he'll invite, 12 to 15 employees at a time. If he's visiting one of our other locations, he does it while he's always at another location. And he, it gives employees an opportunity. They all write a question, put it in a hat, basically, and he pulls out the questions, so it's kind of anonymous, and he answers them, transparently and frankly. And I think that helps. But then we also do cascading goals at Blackbaud. So we start with what are our yearly goals. So just recently, we've got our 2018 goals. Then my organization looks at those goals that say all of HR and says, okay, what are we going to do to support those goals? So what are the main goals that we want to focus on that will drive the business goals, right? And then it cascades down from there. I took the HR goals and said, well, here's what we're going to do to support those goals. And so that kind of helps also keep that clarity of both the outlook, how we're doing, what's our strategic vision, and brings it all the way down to what am I going to do that actually impacts this. So you have the so that kind of answers your second question, right? Because everybody then is going to write their own goals that, if you look at it, will all kind of cascade back up to what we're doing as a company. That's hard to do too, by the way, especially if you don't have the tools to do it. But if you have the tools, which we do, you write them in and they all just kind of cascade underneath.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think even, again, just something I say is simple, but, like the open mic, right? That's a great idea. It's fun, right? It's sort of lighthearted in some ways, but it gives people the opportunity to ask the CEO real questions, maybe without, putting their neck on the line in front of a bigger, sort of broader group of people. Just for the audience out there as well, if you have questions as we navigate through this, you can write those questions in on the right side. I know one question that came in was, will this be recorded? And the answer is yes. We'll post it back out to echovate.com, out to our blog. So feel free to write in questions. One question, Peggy, that I have, and we've sort of had this conversation before, and I've been part of talks that have done this, but talk for a second just about the role and the evolution that women are playing in organizations. How is that being sort of leveled out? I know that's it's a passion, and I know you've spoken on that topic quite a bit. But I'm curious on, that sort of goes back to diversity as well, but, especially lately, it's been sort of a big conversation out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, as a woman who's been in corporate, technology companies for 30 plus years. It's interesting to see the discussions and the actions that are being taken. So I think it's not just women as a whole, it's diversity as a whole, but the discussion right now is focused on women. And women are feeling more and more comfortable about talking about, hey, here are the boundaries, here's what's okay to me and not okay to me. And I think men are starting to kind of realize that, hey, yeah, I probably got away with some stuff 20 years ago, but it doesn't cut it anymore. And I'll be really honest, in my experience, when I've had kind of borderline situations, I've never felt like there was necessarily really bad intent. It just wasn't smart. Didn't have common sense.
It's just inappropriate, right?
Yeah, it's just, come on, think for a second. And so that, at least, I think, is becoming more and more of a discussion and relevant. And, more companies are really kind of beefing up their training, both around biases, which includes women, right? I don't think I can hire a woman for this job because it requires travel and she has kids. Well, you don't know. right?
Right.
As well as harassment. What is harassment? How, what are some things that could be viewed that way from someone else, even though it's not how you view it? So
Can you just give us a quick example on the harassment side of, again, because of course you see everything in the media and you read about it and you wonder, how exaggerated is that? But what's maybe an example, if you can talk about it, whether in your current role or past roles where you've experienced that with an employee that's maybe come to you?
Yeah, and many times so there was an employee that came to me just recently, as head of diversity. Now I'm getting involved in a lot more of these situations where, a manager would make a comment similar to what I just said, that, well, we can't hire a woman, because this and that, and just go on assumptions that aren't true. The harassment that I've seen, I really haven't seen much of direct harassment. It really has been more,
Right.
well, I'm your manager, and so I have two direct reports, one man, one woman, and I sit them down. This is a true story, not for me, but for someone else. And this manager sits them both down and says, "Look, here's the deal. I have told my wife," it was a male manager, "I told my wife that I will never go out to lunch or dinner with a female by myself. So what that means is, Susan, you and I will not ever be going out to like a business lunch, but David, you and I can." Well, how do you think
That's interesting?
Right? So
Right.
what happened?
Right.
So now the man has kind of an inside track, was able to build a, kind of a better relationship. Possibly when an opportunity for promotion comes up, they'll be more likely considered. See where I'm going?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a small nuance, because on one side he's thinking, I don't want to put myself in any situations,
Right.
but it's the unintended bias, right?
Right.
That
And there's some ways to get around it. I'll have lunch with both of you at the same time. We'll go out. We're a team, right? Or I just won't do it with either of you, right?
Right.
But to kind of then separate it out, and those are the kinds of things over the years that have led to women not getting past that glass ceiling. It's those sorts of kind of what they now call microaggressions that have built up and led to that, which we're trying to break down.
That's phenomenal. So one quick question, sort of in that topic around diversity and bias, is: are we, to use sort of a car analogy, are we in the horse and buggy stage, the early Model Ford, or the Tesla?
We're definitely not in Tesla.
I would figure we were not.
Definitely not. And we're not in the horse and buggy. I know the horse and buggy stage. Trust me.
Right.
So we, and the movement, I'd say, over the last 2 years has been, fast. So we're in the Ford. I'd say we're in the
that's good.
Model Ford stage. Yeah, there's a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah, no, at least there's the conversation that's happening around that, which is great. Well, we are just right at the 1:30 mark here, and we like to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Peggy, thank you for your time. And I hope that someday in the future you'll write a book and we can read all of these great stories. No, I mean that sincerely, because as I think about just how you do your planning and town halls and transparency and diversity, and we're a smaller organization, much smaller than Blackbaud, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from those processes and the thoughtfulness around putting your employee first. So, I want you to write a book so you can get your story out there, because it's exciting. Well, thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Peggy, thank you for taking time out of your day, and hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again.